It's my show, ding dong.
There we go. Hello. It is October 17th, 2024. Welcome to the stream. Casual Thursday. Not even Jack. How's everybody doing today? Hope you're all having a good Thursday. As mine. A little bit easier. No more inquiry. Cover. And Parliament's still on a break week, so it's a quiet time. My voice is quiet.
It's my show, ding dong.
I think I turned down my mic because I was yelling last time. Better? See, it goes into the red and it looks super loud. Is that too loud now? Turn it down to there. What about that? That sounds good. All right. Better? All right, there we go. All right. Good. All right. If I have one request, stop retweeting this. No more people retweeting this, so I can use my my notifications bar again. We're at 1.1 thousand retweets and like 2.3K likes. Just that's enough. That's enough. No more interactions with this tweet. But we'll play this because this was the big bombshell statement Trudeau made at the foreign interference inquiry while he was doing his under oath testimony. So we'll just play the whole answer that caused all the upset.
Because I am Prime Minister.
Actually, should I just find someone with the better video? Because the audio I captured is awful.
I'm privy to all these information.
I think I recorded the audio twice. That's what I think the problem is like the audio's playing twice on this recording. The way I recorded
have the
it.
names of a number.
All right, we'll play it from the beginning. Just because it's well, I thought I think people thought it was more substantial, but the more I think about it, it seems like it's not actually that significant of a statement. And I'll explain why later.
Because I am Prime Minister and privy to all these informations, I have the names
all of these informations.
Of a number of parliamentarians.
A number.
Parliamentarians and or candidates in the Conservative Party of Canada who are...
He's very privy. He has his own privy council to be privy to things.
Or for whom there's clear intelligence around foreign interference. And I have directed CSIS and others to try and inform the Conservative Party leader to
yeah, he needs to bring the beard back. I've said that for a while.
To be able to make decisions that protect the integrity of that party, of its members, from attempts at foreign activities around foreign interference. And the decision by the leader of the Conservative Party to not get those classified briefings.
Yes, I think so. I agree. When he had the beard, exactly.
In his party.
He needs to lean into that look, I think.
Nobody in a position of power knows the names of these individuals and can take appropriate action. It also means nobody's there to stand up for those individuals. If the intelligence is
the moist.
People want to wear a mask. That is okay. It protects others more than it protects you, because it prevents you from breathing or speaking moistly on them. Oh, what a terrible image. But it...
I love talking to my one of the photographers I work with, Andrew Mead, shout out. he was at all of those press conferences during COVID, and just talked to him about freezing his ass off in that little, like, not even a tent. It was like, if you ever were in like any sort of competitive soccer league, or you had a sibling with it, you've seen the kind of like just the tent sort of thing that it had, where it was just the four legs and the roof, and I think they had two walls sort of to protect from the wind, or I think it was just the two walls, but it like made it like a wind tunnel. All this to say that Andrew has nothing but horror stories from just freezing his ass off in the middle of winter during COVID, waiting for Trudeau to come out for one of these press conferences.
Or just allegations from...
Because that's like all the people watching it on TV saw was him come out like to the podium and start talking. But you never saw all of the people who had to just be freezing their butts off outside of the cottage to make that work. Yeah, like a mini FEMA camp for the reporters outside of the Trudeau's like secondary home, because it wasn't even like his official residence. It was the Rideau cottage, because his official residence is filled with rats and asbestos, and because we're I think objectively a very cheap country, we just refuse to invest the money it would require to make the official residence of the leader of our country livable, just livable, like just baseline livable, where he can live in it. He or she, I don't know who the next prime minister is. It's probably going to be a he, but could be a she later. But like currently, Trudeau and his family cannot live in the official residence because it's filled with rats and asbestos.
A single source.
Well, yeah, you could argue it is what it is thematically what the leader of Canada deserves to live in, but I don't know. I think we should maybe have some more respect for ourselves as a country and give the leader of our country just the Stornoway, the place where the opposition leader lives, where Poilievre currently lives. Poilievre will objectively be downgrading his residence if he becomes prime minister and has to move into the cottage. Let's be clear, he would be moving into the prime minister's secondary residence. Not really a secondary residence, it's a cottage. It's supposed to be like a vacation home. It's not supposed to be a residence of any sort.
And that is something that, as you've seen, we are ready to question intelligence when it comes towards the Liberal Party members, because we need to make sure if you're going to end someone's career, you're doing it in a responsible way. The decision of the leader of the Conservative Party to not receive the necessary clearance to get those names and protect the integrity of his party is bewildering to me and entirely lacks common sense.
So that was the statement he made, was basically, and so here's the thing. The way he worded that first part was very particular. And we should go back to what he said specifically at the beginning, because he said it very specifically. And I've spent the last 2 days trying to break down what he said, and I think he's very dramatic, but he was very clever in the way he worded this.
Because I am Prime Minister and privy to all these informations, I have the names of a number of parliamentarians.
The names of a number of parliamentarians. That could be anything from 1 to infinite number. All of the Conservatives. So it could be any number. It's a number, so it could be any number of parliamentarians. Parliamentarians means members of the House of Commons, members of Parliament, and senators.
Former parliamentarians
and or candidates
in the Conservative Party of
in
Canada,
the Conservative Party
who are
engaged
or
at high risk of
for whom there's clear intelligence around foreign interference.
So, for whom there is clear evidence around foreign interference. So, combining all of that, what he has just said is nothing new. He hasn't said anything we don't already know, technically. Because, like the NSICOP report, that if you don't report I should just, because I always forget. I use the acronym so much that I forget. So, National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians. They basically released a report earlier this year that said exactly that. It didn't say conservative specifically, but it said there are former and current and parliamentarians and possibly, I don't think they ever said candidates, but we can assume from what we already know from the foreign interference inquiry that there were candidates that this applies to as well. But there are former and current parliamentarians, which means senators or MPs, who are witting, semi-witting, or unwitting participants or targets of foreign interference. Now, we already know Michael Chong has been a target of foreign interference. There's clear intelligence from, as Trudeau said, of Michael Chong being a target of foreign interference. Kenny Chiu, who was a former Conservative MP, so former parliamentarian, and or a candidate, because there's clear evidence that Kenny Chiu was targeted by some level of foreign interference during the 2021 election. 2021 to 2019. I think it's 2021. So that's former or current parliamentarians and or and or candidates. Also, we know that there was some level of foreign interference that was involving or targeting or implicating Conservative Senator Victor O. His name came up in previous testimony at the... So if we just take the names we already know, Michael Chong, Kenny Chiu, and Senator Victor O, that covers the whole gambit of what Justin Trudeau just said. The NSICOP report already said that. We already know that Trudeau has the security clearance to read the NSICOP report. So what he said in that clip isn't technically anything new. And as a reporter who has reported all of these things, it's a little maddening. But it's actually not anything new. He hasn't said anything we didn't technically already know. He made the statement more explicit, but it wasn't things we hadn't already learned from the foreign interference inquiry already, or from previous stuff before the interference inquiry, because the Michael Chong stuff we learned about before the inquiry even got going. You could say that the Michael Chong stuff is one of the reasons why we have the inquiry in the first place. But yeah, no, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, he was I don't want to say too clever, but he was very specific and intentional about every word he used there. I swear to God, no one better be retweeting this again. Oh, thank you, Nathaniel. Yeah, no, I just want to be able to look at my notifications tab again, and it be usable. So I have lined up for us more of Trudeau's testimony, but I also I just want to play some video games as well. So no, Michael is not, as much as we all love Conservative MP Michael Chong. He is not technically one of the precious Michaels. Those are two very specific Michaels. Like, does it like turns it back on to light? I've never had that issue. Like, goes on to light. I have it on eternally as dark mode. It's always dark mode. I am the night. Ever vigilant, always watching. I'm not the hero X wants right now, but I'm the hero it deserves. I don't remember how I did it either, so I'd help you, but... Oh no, Timberborn's not loaded yet. Oh, there it is. Alright, where are we going? Alright, here we go. Timberborn's loaded. Oh wait, that's the, we have the, Saskatchewan debate loaded up as well for later. Wait.
Order, please. À l'ordre, s'il vous plaît.
We'll just
Own party, but with opposite.
straight to
His
the
own
cross-examination.
intelligence materials.
Because I'm not gonna lie, a lot of the rest of Trudeau's testimony was, I think the word I will use is redundant. There wasn't a lot of new stuff that was provided.
That will be
It was kind of sort of like getting him on record saying things that other people who work for him had already said. Like his, like,
security
chief of staff.
Actors even.
All right.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Trudeau, my name is Prabjot Singh for the Sikh Coalition. You spoke to Commission.
See, this is like right here. I told you. It's like, oh, he's bringing up the India stuff, so it will get overshadowed at the commission. Literally first people to cross-examine him. Like, although if your argument was that now he can't say it because he can be like, oh, it's a open investigation, would have been the same outcome. It just would have been a little bit more awkward. What would Joe Biden say if he was sitting next to Trudeau, like at the committee?
Council earlier about this intricate network of Canada-based Indian diplomats, senior government officials in India, and then the Lawrence Bishnoi gang, and who went on and engaged in violence in Canada. So before we move into some of the more substantive issues, I just want to clarify and confirm a couple of facts for the record. You spoke about a number of ways that diplomats covertly and illegally collected information on individuals in Canada, including threatening to revoke visas. Some of the information that was collected.
Also, there's been a bunch of new updates for Timberborn. I'm so excited. It's a city building game where you play like hyper intelligent beavers in a post-apocalyptic world, because the way you like harvest metal is like through abandoned skyscrapers. It's a lot of like what is it, environmental storytelling, because it never explicitly says it's a post-apocalyptic world, but there's like skyscrapers that are all like, you know, when like it's post-apocalypse and the skyscrapers, they're all like hollowed out and like the grass and the vines have like reclaimed it. There's that shit all over the map, and that's where you get your medal. It's a very fun game. All right, we'll get back to the normal stuff.
By diplomats was also done by coercion, including threats of violence against family members in India, correct?
All right.
I am very aware that there is an ongoing RCMP investigation and indeed trials and court cases on these issues. So I really would be hesitant to venture much further than I already have in which what I was saying was pretty much repeating what the RCMP announced on Monday. I wouldn't want to go further in characterizing things that are questions better asked of the RCMP.
That's
Sinwar's
totally fair.
absolutely
So the
dead.
RCMP's press release and its comments at the press conference stated that organized crime was used to execute the violent activities to create a perception of an unsafe environment targeting the South Asian community in Canada. Do you recall that?
Yes.
So I think you would agree that this is quite an alarming and intrusive attack on Canada. So this goes beyond simple disinformation and amplifying narratives in the media that Canada is unsafe. These individuals and government officials actually orchestrated violence to make people feel unsafe and come to that conclusion. Is that fair?
I'd actually say there seem to be two goals in this. One is, yes, to make Canadians, particularly South Asian Canadians, feel less safe here in their own country. But secondly, is actually to help prove a point that the Indian government has been.
See, also, when I don't even know if I wanted to say it, but the thing that's sort of peaked is another thing is this India stuff also cuts into the sort of narrative that violence has been skyrocketing, because I mean violence has gone up compared to like pandemic levels because we saw it reduce, but one level where crime has gone up a lot even compared to post-pandemic levels is gang-related crime. And I just thought that was an interesting overlap with this.
Been trying to make about Canada for quite some time, that we are a country that doesn't take seriously violence or terrorism or incitements to hatred, which is entirely false, but failing
What should we name our
an
beaver
ability
settlement?
to point out how Canada has been supposedly failing to prevent violence, it seems like folks within the Indian government have decided to create violence and unlawfulness in Canada as a way of demonstrating the point that they are trying to make, that there is violence and unlawfulness in Canada. And I think that is exceptionally egregious as an approach to a neighboring sovereign democracy.
So you also indicated to Commission Council earlier that the diplomats were passing
I didn't see
information to officials at the highest
Xbox
level
one.
of the Indian government.
I saw the one
who
where
then
it's
would pass on
allegedly him
information to
throwing
the
like a
criminal gangs
stick
to orchestrate the
at
violence.
some drone.
So given that
While
reality,
he's like got his like
this was
fucking
not
hand blown
just a
off
rogue
after
operation
like a drone
of
strike.
a few individuals.
Which I don't
that
know
went
why
off track.
Israel released that video.
At some level, in some form, there was a clear policy decision that was authorized and directed
like
by
a
responsible members of the government of India to
smart
orchestrate this violence. Is that fair?
I think that is
There's a
an
reason
extremely important question.
U.S. didn't
And
release the body cam
that
footage of
is
them
a
killing
question that
Osama bin Laden
actually
and then
we have
threw his
been
body in the ocean.
repeatedly asking the government
Like,
of India
do you want a martyr?
to
Because this is how you
assist
get a
us
martyr.
and to get to the bottom of the question of whether it is or could be rogue elements within the government, or whether it was a more systematic endeavor for the government of India is exactly the kind of thing that for investigators here on the ground in Canada, it is somewhat removed from being able to uncover the internal machinations of the Indian government of who went wrong or who did this or who did that. That's why from the very beginning, we have been asking for India, the Indian government, to take these allegations seriously and proceed with their own investigations and work with us on figuring out exactly how these egregious violations of Canadian sovereignty actually happened.
Are you aware of public statements made by Prime Minister Modi in spring of this year where he said something to the effect of, today's India doesn't send dossiers to other countries to request assistance. Today's India will kill our enemies in their homes. Are you aware that that statement was made publicly by the Prime Minister?
That was a public statement that I am aware of.
What?
Maybe not in those exact words, but
sure,
as you say.
Something to that effect. So you spoke earlier about
something
the
to that effect?
instability and context that we exist in right now and how it intersects.
I gave you all the clues, Mr. Policeman.
With different foreign interference threats.
Jesus.
So I think you would agree that the Modi government's autocratic behavior in terms of these specific violent acts that have been carried out over the past year or two is a threat not only to Canada's sovereignty and institutions, but a very real threat to the international rules-based order itself.
One of the reasons we have been so deeply engaged with our allies, particularly our Five Eyes allies of the United States, the UK, New Zealand, and Australia on this. We are a tight security partnership, us 5 countries, but also others, is because we are seeing right now around the world a pulling back of the rule of law, contesting of the international rules-based order. Whether it be Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine.
Yeah, it's like, well, because we were told he was like hiding in some bunker.
China's
so
coercive
for him to
diplomacy,
die,
as evidenced by the
basically what sounds like
arresting
a
of
firefight
the arbitrary
is
detention of 2 Michaels.
an interesting development, to say the least.
Ensuring that amongst our community of nations, particularly democracies, that purport to be and aspire to be rule of law countries, that we be there to highlight and stand strongly against violations of international law is really important. So this is something that we have highlighted to allies, and it's something that many countries around the world share of concerns that if we don't have the rule of law and the international rules-based order at this particular complex moment in global history, then everyone becomes less safe and everyone is poised to suffer either economically or worse.
So that's a helpful kind of exposition.
Yeah, I don't know why they
released
released that
order in
footage.
general. The question was whether India's violent activities and attacks against Canada and Canadians, you would consider them a threat against the rules-based order and stability on the geopolitical stage, specifically with relation to these acts.
I think I have been very clear that Canada, as a country of the rule of law, will always stand up for the rules-based order, regardless of whether it is the arbitrary detention of 2 Michaels by China or actions that that the RCMP highlighted earlier this week that involves India government engaging in facilitating violence in Canada against Canadians.
No, I think they just. I don't know if it was. I think they just.
So a significant amount of.
They're like, we got him. We have the video of it, and didn't really think through
focused on disrupting
how the
India's
video
capabilities.
would be received.
But in the context of a sustained campaign of violence that lasted at least a year, I would suggest that accountability for those responsible is crucial to deterring this kind of violence. So my question is about what steps Canada can and will take to ensure that the senior officials who actually orchestrated and authorized this are held accountable. Will Canada apply targeted sanctions against RAW, India's intelligence agency, as well as those officials found to be responsible in an investigation in order to push India to cooperate?
The primary driver of the government's actions in this case, and in most, if not all cases, is ensuring the safety and security of Canadians. That is one of our top foreign policy goals, always. And we will continue to look at things we can do to ensure that Canadians are safe in Canada and when they travel overseas. Many of our foreign policy positions have flowed from that, and that will always be the lens with which we look at any possible future decisions. And I'm not going to hypothesize about what steps we might need to be taking to keep Canadians safe. What I can say is the steps that we have taken so far have been focused on ensuring greater safety for Canadians, ensuring our ability to keep Canadians safe by disrupting networks that were causing significant violence to Canadians.
So I don't think that really answered the question about accountability, but I'm going to move on. Yeah, you mentioned Prime Minister Modi's comments to you in September 2023, urging Canada to arrest people who are outspoken against the Indian government. We've also heard evidence from SITE, from RCMP and Global Affairs that India seeks to influence Canadian policy to criminally prosecute Sikhs who advocate for Khalistan or otherwise criticize India. So yourself and the other witnesses have rightfully insisted that Canadian agencies already investigate any criminal activity, but that lawful political advocacy is protected by the Charter. So given that fact and that India engages in foreign interference with the objective of influencing Canadian policy in this regard, would you support suspending intelligence and information sharing agreements signed in 2018 that can be misused by the government of India to target Sikh activists engaging in lawful advocacy for Khalistan?
Let me be very clear once again. Canada's policy is around one India.
Let me be clear.
We believe in the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of India. We respect that. We certainly expect India to respect the sovereignty of Canada, which in this case they have not. It is also extremely important
that would be
that people who come to this country from
very wild conspiracy, Amity,
understand that they are free to hold the political beliefs that they choose to when you're in Canada. We have a charter that protects people's freedoms, people's freedom of expression, people's freedoms of political views. And that is not just a foundational principle of free democracies all around the world, but it's particularly important for Canada, that is a country to which people have come from every corner of the world, in some cases choosing to leave their home country because of political disagreements or other reasons. So defending the rights of people to hold political views that may be unpopular in their home country is a foundational responsibility for any Canadian government.
So will you consider suspending those intelligence and information sharing agreements that can be misused by the government of India to target Sikh activists, particularly considering the evidence we've seen that India engages in foreign interference and disinformation for that objective?
As I've said a number of times, we are not
going to end
to provoke or create a fight with India. The Indian government made a horrific mistake in thinking
Horrific
that they
mistake.
could interfere as aggressively as they did in the safety and sovereignty of Canada. And we need to respond in order to ensure Canadians' safety. What other steps we will take will be determined in due course, but every step of the way, our single overarching priority is ensuring that we are keeping all Canadians safe.
So we heard this week that 6 diplomats have been expelled from Canada and sent back to India. But given the long history of Indian foreign interference, the intensity we've observed and learned about through this commission, and the fact that this appears to be, in some form, a conscious policy decision by the government of India, I think it's reasonable that there's concerns that when new diplomats come to replace those ones, that there's concerns that they might continue to engage in similar kinds of activities. So looking back at India's foreign interference activities, which have clearly escalated, I want to look forward and ask you to provide some insight to the Commission, because I think it's fair to say that the Government of Canada and Canadian agencies failed to detect India's activities before they occurred, before the assassination of Hardeep Singh and this campaign of violence, and whatever steps have been taken failed to deter India from continuing to engage in violence against Canada and in Canada. So can you provide some insight on what lessons you think have been learned by the government and agencies that can actually inform how Canada increases its capacity to detect that kind of activity and actually effectively deters it in the future?
Well, first of all, let me say that the issue of the Indian government as a possible source of foreign interference is not something that only appeared over the past weeks or even over the past year. Canadian intelligence agencies have been collecting that information for a number of years now. And as I said in an earlier answer this morning, we are constantly adapting and adjusting to shifting approaches by other states as they engage through different technologies, through different means, through different vectors into advancing their aims in Canada. And we will continue to learn and adjust as necessary to do what we must do to keep Canadians safe, to protect our institutions and our democracy.
Madam Commissioner, with your leave, I have one final question, if that's possible.
No, because you're 2 minutes over your time, and we have many this afternoon.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Counsel for Michael Chung.
Prime Minister, my client was here in September and gave evidence to the Commissioner.
Here we go.
And one of the concerns that he expressed is that this country has become, in his words, a playground for foreign interference by states like PRC and India. Mr. Mendicino was here last week and disputed that phrase, playground of foreign interference. Given the revelations by the RCMP and by you, sir, on Monday, isn't Mr. Chong's assessment closer to the mark than Mr. Mendicino's?
No, I think it reinforces how wrong Mr. Chong is, because what this week has been all about is demonstrating the capacity and the reality that Canada has been both detecting foreign interference and acting on it. I would suggest that knowing about this and revealing it to the public and creating diplomatic malaise, to put it lightly, is an example of us pushing back strongly against attempts at interference in this country.
Not just attempts, sir, successful interference.
Yes.
You confirmed this morning that your government's assessment of the PRC's targeting of Michael Chong and his relations in Hong Kong is not foreign interference, but is instead lawful diplomatic activity. Sir, there were, in 2021, 4 intelligence products. We've only seen one of them, but there were 4 concerning PRC activities directed at my client, all coming from CSIS. The one that we've been able to see in some unredacted form is the famous IMU from the 31st of May, which I expect you've seen before. It says explicitly that CSIS regards there as being multiple threat actors, including the Ministry of State Security. Are you aware of that, sir? I can show you the document if it helps, but you may be familiar with it already.
I am Commissioner, sorry, just before the Prime Minister answered, my friend said you confirmed this morning that the PRC's targeting of Chong was not foreign interference. My recollection is the Prime Minister testified that Zhao Wei's targeting of Chong was not foreign interference. So I believe that was the evidence the Prime Minister gave, but I stand to be corrected by my friend.
Yes. I was talking about Zhao Wei.
Yeah, it's much of a muchness to me, sir. So my point is this. The Ministry of State Security, you're familiar with that agency?
Yes.
Is there any such agency in this country?
I think drawing parallels between Canadian structures and the PRC structures is extremely difficult at best.
Yes, particularly in the case of the MSS, because it's a foreign intelligence agency, and we don't have one of those, right?
We have an intelligence agency that focuses on collection internationally, which is CSIS.
Right, right. But we don't send spies abroad, and we don't send secret police abroad. Isn't that right, sir?
I'm not going to speak to CSIS operations, but I can tell you there are CSIS employees all around the world.
So my point is this: the MSS is PRC's.
Or I'm missing something about
well, let
what
me get
CSIS
to it.
does.
MSS is PRC's equivalent of Russia's FSB or the Soviet Union's old KGB, or indeed India's RAW. The research and analysis.
Or the US CIA.
I'm sure that'll go
We
great.
don't have anything like that. My point, sir, is that if a diplomat,
Didn't they do the
so-called
reverse the
diplomat,
last time
Weizhou,
Labour lost?
in this country,
Are
is
Labour
sending
trying to
information about
return
a
the
Canadian
favour?
MP, 2 Canadian MPs, as it turns out, back to MSS, not back to the foreign department, not back to foreign affairs, but to China's spy agency. That, sir, is not lawful diplomacy. Don't you agree with that?
Oh, yeah, I'll say 2 things about that. First of all, I'm not entirely certain that you understand what CSIS is, if not Canadians' agency for collecting intel overseas.
We got Mean Girl
And
Trudeau in the
secondly,
house.
In terms of the analysis of what Zhao Wei or others were doing, I am obviously not an expert in the hierarchies within the People's Republic of China's various agencies. But what I can say is I defer to CSIS's conclusions on these because they are the intelligence agency that provides me information, provides us information on foreign activities, particularly bad actors. CSIS's conclusion in this case that we've seen before this commission is that the actions that Zhao Wei engaged in regards to your client did not constitute foreign interference. Now,
What?
I am reporting that. I am not the person who made the analysis and determination that it was on one side of the line or others. I have confidence in our agencies that do make that determination, however.
Sir, Zhao Wei was not a lawful diplomat. He was a foreign intelligence agent. He was a Chinese spy. Do you accept that?
I accept when I will state that he was ejected from Canada because he was no longer able to even carry the role of diplomat, which was his overt role, but I also explained that there were situations in which CSIS has concluded that he engaged in foreign interference activities, albeit not towards your client, Michael Chong.
So I put it to you that Zhao Wei was outed as a foreign spy, not by your government, but by the Globe and Mail.
There is no question that the criminal who leaked the information to the media.
He says that he keeps he hits on this a bunch. He keeps calling he hits on calling the leaker or referring to the leaker in criminal terms, like the criminal who leaked to sort of thing. He hits on that a lot. I was really noticing that yesterday.
Had a role to play in our decision to expel Michael Chong. But
that's not what he meant to say.
As I said, expel Zhao Wei.
Oh.
But there were three factors that went into that decision to declare him persona non grata. One was the escalating tensions between Canada and China, where they, despite repeated attempts, refused to decrease or stop their interference activities. Two was the fact that Zhao Wei was indeed, and this perhaps goes to your contention,
I like
engaged in.
He's one of the, whenever, here's what I'll say. Every time I reach out to Michael Chong's office for comment on a story, without fail, whether or not he can or has comment to provide, always gets back to me. So even if he's like, even if he has nothing to say and he's like, I don't want to touch that story with a 10-foot pole, always gets back to me fairly quickly, might I add, to say, respectfully, I will not be commenting on this story. And that's what I'll say. As a reporter, if nothing else, always gets back to me and always is like, one way or the other, lets me know whether or not he's going to comment. And that I appreciate it.
Foreign interference activities, albeit not towards Michael Chong. And three was the fact that his name was plastered across the newspapers, made it impossible for him to continue to be a diplomat in Canada.
NSICOP reports that CSIS identified Zhao Wei as a candidate for expulsion in 2019, several years before the Globe and Mail story. But your government let him stay here. Nothing was done about him, and you, on your own evidence, had never even heard of him until you read about him in the Globe that morning. I put it to you, sir, that as head of government, you ought to have known who Zhao Wei was and what was going on. Should someone not have informed you about his activities?
As I've said a number of times, in my role as Prime Minister, I need to know
Mean girl
the
Trudeau.
behavior of China. I need to know the behavior of India. I need to know the behavior of Russia in regards to Canada, in regards to Canadians, in regards to Canadian interests. I do not need to know the operational details to be able to establish and empower the agencies to actually go after that. Now, I need to know the type of things they are doing, but knowing the actual name of the individual, there are such a large number of names that I trust and count on my intelligence agencies to do the follow-ups on the dozens of diplomats that they must keep a close eye on across the country at all given times. And me sitting with a list of names of potential problematic people does nothing to help keep Canadians safe in the role that I have.
But, sir, it goes well beyond particular names, because what you weren't told was that there was a debate raging in your government between CSIS on the one hand and Global Affairs on the other. CSIS assessed that these activities, we see it in the 2021 IMU, were threats to the security of Canada. CSIS conducted a TRM of Michael Chong on the 2nd of May for that same reason. Meanwhile, Mr. Morrison...
Excuse me, it was not a TRM.
It was a defensive briefing, actually. I misspoke this morning, so you caught me on that. It was a defensive briefing to Michael Chong, not a threat reduction measure, which is apparently an important distinction, but...
No, come on, you're the goddamn Prime Minister. You're not allowed to say, apparently that's an important distinction. It's an important distinction. Don't ask me to explain it. But I'll go find someone who's smarter than me to explain why that's an important distinction. God damn. Don't say that. Don't say it like that.
That for now. I thought Mr. Chong's evidence was that he was informed by
Come on.
CSIS as a TRM. In any event.
That was after the leaks.
That's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Yes.
I believe that was a TRM.
But the thing is, it's legally important. It is like one of the main ways something can be important. Like what do you mean? It's legally important, but it's not like if there's a legal difference, then it's an important difference. Yeah, and like I get what he's saying too, but you don't. Why are you saying it so flippantly like that? Like it's not that big of a deal to mix those two up. If your lawyer is being like, sorry, can I interject? There's a difference. Don't be flippant. I don't know why.
It was the earlier
ones
that
of
were
May,
defensive.
2023. That was a
I know. I know.
Precisely.
I agree
so
with you.
You've got the security service on the one side assessing that these are foreign threats. This is foreign interference. You've got Mr. Morrison and Jody Thomas, Global Affairs, saying, no, you've misunderstood. This is consistent with the Vienna Convention. What you ought to have known, but were never told, sir, was that there was this debate going on and that it was causing disagreements between agencies about how to properly analyze and characterize particular instances. Michael Chong happens to be one. There may very well have been others. Someone ought to have told you that. And so I want to push back on this notion that we've heard from other witnesses. And
actually, let me push back on that right there. That I testified earlier today.
It got real.
That I am fully aware and indeed regularly apprised of tension of constructive, creative tension, of disagreements of perspective between diplomats and spies, or between our Global Affairs Canada and
But sir, no one told you before May 2023 that there was a dispute in your government about whether Zhao Wei was acting lawfully or illegally.
Right, not about this particular person, but about a range of diplomats from many different countries who are engaged in questionable activities that we have to make determinations around which ones and when we kick out, knowing full well.
Is the argument that there's so many different diplomats doing questionable things that I just didn't get to this one? Because I don't know if that's a great argument.
That as soon as we PNG anyone, we lose diplomats on the other side who are not engaged in subterfuge. So there are many factors that go into when one takes a PNG decision. If we were to kick out every single diplomat who raised concerns, we wouldn't have any diplomats and therefore no representation in any of our adversarial countries.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I also like that. Mostly my criticisms are about. I don't know if these are the best strategic arguments, because if I can make these just off the cuff like criticisms of what he's saying, just think about what a determined like someone who's determined and willing to do like a deep dive to really get critical on what he's saying can do with some of these statements.
making sure that we do have people there, and the price of that is having people here. Now, what our intelligence agencies are constantly doing, as you're pointing out, is keeping an eye, metaphorically or actually, on many of these people, while engaging in an ongoing dialogue, sometimes a debate, with Global Affairs Canada to ensure that we're getting that balance right of protecting Canadians and allowing the work that Canadians are doing overseas in these countries to continue to further protect Canadians.
Sir, you've characterized this debate as a good thing in your words this morning. Other witnesses have come and called it a healthy debate. I want to suggest to you that it wasn't a healthy debate. Having a debate about what foreign interference means and where the line is between that and lawful diplomacy is fine to a point. But at a certain point,
yeah, that was a big one.
One of your agencies is saying one thing and the other one is saying the other. Someone has to come to you as the head of government and say, we have this dispute.
But then the question becomes, why can they make those charges, but the RCMP can't on anyone? I guess they did sort of arrest, but it boosts, I guess, Trudeau, or bolsters the credibility of the claim the Canadian government has made. And I don't think it's correct to say that Trudeau is making. I think that's the issue. This is the government of the Canada, the government, federal government, and the RCMP are making these allegations. And the American sort of the arrest definitely bolsters it because it falls into that sort of argument that this is not just happening in Canada. Yeah. And it's like it makes it harder to argue that somehow Trudeau was like manipulating the RCMP to like give up their Thanksgiving Wednesday to do a fake press conference about India. Like that's just not gonna like it almost gives Trudeau too much credit. Like, you think Trudeau has way more power than he actually does if you think he could orchestrate that out of thin air on a Thanksgiving Monday. Just because his 20 to 40 liberal backbenchers signed a letter to ask him nicely to leave. Like, think it through. And also, he did this by sending a bunch of security and policing officials to a third country to meet with Indian officials. The Thursday before the letter was even known to the public, he sent them there a day before. He knew, and I think he only learned about it the next day. Like none of it makes sense. It falls apart immediately. It's a terrible conspiracy theory. Try again. Like, you're getting a D- at best on that one.
It's causing us trouble in operationalizing particular instances, my client's instance being one, but no doubt there were others. Someone should have come to you, the NSIA should have come to you and said, Prime Minister, we've got this difference of opinion. We want you to know both sides, and we need your guidance. But no one ever did that, and so you were left in the dark.
But that is exactly why the authority for PNGing someone rests in the Minister of Foreign Affairs' office.
It's all Jolie's fault.
She was very much closer to this debate
because
it is her responsibility. And when the decision was elevated to, okay, we should possibly and probably PNG this individual, then I was brought in as part of the discussion around that.
I don't get the Jolie hate. I don't understand it.
Sir, when the story came out in the Globe and Mail,
I think it's just she has things that makes her file makes people
Global Affairs
angrier.
Went back, looked at its records, found that in fact CSIS had been raising alarms about Wei Zhao's activities.
If she was like labor minister, I don't think anyone would have any criticism.
Moved beyond the working level, meaning they somehow had not come to the attention of leaders within Global Affairs. So again, I say to you that this is a failing of this government to take.
No one ever has a very concrete
serious
answers when I'm
situations
like, why do you
what's foreign interference and what isn't, and
what is
actually
the
resolve them. It's all well and
vitriol
good to debate them, but at a certain point, a judgment has to be made, and someone has to give governance and guidance about.
And like half the time when I hear criticisms of Jolie, it just sort of sounds like they're like, well, she sounds kind of clunky in English. And it just reminds me of where is it? And this is for a lot of people in Canadian politics where they're like,
you should try talking in my shoes from 1 mile.
I think you meant.
I know what I meant to mean. Do you even know how smart I am in Spanish? Of course you don't. For once.
because it's like anytime there's like a like someone's like, oh, they sound kind of clunky when they're talking, and it's like they're a francophone. It's like, well, because they're translating in real time, dummy. You know how dumb I sound in French? Like the reverse of that? I know that's not your criticism. I'm just saying. I'm just sort of talking to a straw man third person.
How things
amalgamation of a few people
proceed, and that wasn't done until we read about it in the Globe and Mail
on the contrary,
2nd of May.
Au contraire, is a judgment. The fact that it wasn't determined in those previous moments that the threshold for PNG had been met.
I'm not saying there's no good criticisms. I'm just,
yes, you can act by PNGing
making
someone,
fun of
but
a
you
very
can
specific
also act by saying, no, we're going to keep this individual under surveillance. We're going to keep keep them within what we know. I can't speak to whether or not there is active surveillance on any individual or not, but continue to be aware of this individual and what they are doing, because it has purpose. Finding out when that right line is and when that moment is not something to be taken lightly, and it is something that rests on the collected and collective expertise of people who've been working in the security and intelligence domain for years to develop the expertise on when that timing is right.
So it wasn't a matter of you choosing not to act when it came to Weizhou. You didn't know you had a choice before you at all.
But the act is not mine. The act is not mine. I do not determine when someone should be.
Well, the same goes for Madame Jolie.
Then you can ask Madame Jolie about that.
Just a moment. I think just wait for him to answer. And same thing on your side, just wait for the question.
We go back to debating days at McGill, so there's a little bit of back and forth there.
My point, sir, was that there's no evidence that this was put before Madame Jolie or whoever the foreign minister was at the time either. It all came to a head because of the leak. And what I'm suggesting, you have rightly said, that the leak is criminal. Absolutely right. Should not have happened. But this debate, which I say is not healthy, but was festering in your government, boiled over with someone taking the law into their own hands, what they ought never to have done, and revealing all this to the world. And only then did you react. There was nothing proactive. That's my concern, sir.
Well, the issue with the criminal who leaked this information is they got it wrong in what they leaked. And regardless of what's in the newspapers or not, it is incumbent upon a serious, responsible government not to react to partisan attacks or erroneous but salacious headlines, but to react on the substance of things. And that's exactly what we did when we, as a government collectively, in the person of the foreign minister, made the determination that it was time to PNG Zhao Wei.
So you seem to be suggesting that really Michael Chong overreacted in worrying about his relations in Hong Kong.
No, not at all.
Well, that is what you're suggesting.
No.
This studio may seem really big, but it's only like 2 feet wide. It's just very long.
I am suggesting that confronted with or faced with a leak that is itself erroneous, that suggests that China has threatened with violence his family, as the inference of the leak and the subsequent headlines were, Mr. Chong had every right to be concerned and even outraged, as did everyone. As were we, by the idea that his family had been threatened with direct physical violence, which is what the leak and the leaker suggested. We now know that that is wrong, and that is why it is really important that governments act based on actual analysis and actual intelligence and evaluation of that intelligence, and not just what appears, as you say, in the Globe and Mail.
Well, sir, I told Mr. Clow this yesterday, and I'll say it to you. Mr. Chong does not share your seeming confidence that his relatives in Hong Kong will never be coerced or threatened or even physically harmed by that state. It is not a rule of law democracy. It is not a state that has a track record of respecting people's freedom of conscience, freedom of political thought. And so these concerns that he has, whether they are based in intelligence that was misinterpreted in the Globe and Mail or not, are legitimate and fair, and you seem to be wanting to downplay them.
I mean, if it's legitimate for him to have these concerns, but the argument Trudeau is making is that the actual intelligence suggests otherwise. I guess the argument is whether or not that intelligence is correct.
I want to push back on that.
I am not downplaying them in the least. What I am saying is, as a responsible government, as a government that is making decisions about how best to protect Canadians, including and especially parliamentarians, we need to rely on the best intelligence and evidence and analysis and recommendations of our security agencies. And that is what we have leaned on in terms of concluding what threats were there on Mr. Chong and what positions and postures we should take because of it. We are a country that leans on its intelligence agencies, not on criminals leaking things to newspapers.
One final point, sir. The evidence
he's really hammering that criminal part.
Other parts of the government have not relied on CSIS's warnings. In fact, the Minister of Public Safety doesn't even seem to have received them, or certainly didn't read them. The same is true of the NSIA. The same seems to be true of the Clerk of the Privy Council. So it's all well and good for you to say we're a country that respects our security agencies. The evidence, sir, has been that the security agency has been sidelined, and the concerns it's been trying to raise have been neglected and sometimes not even read.
I think much of what we have demonstrated through this commission as a government is that we have taken seriously from the very first day threats to national security through creating things that Mr. Chong was opposed to, like the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians. But I would suggest if Mr. Chong wanted to be part of an organization that was taking security seriously, he implore his leader, Pierre Poilievre, to get a security briefing so he can hear directly from
I didn't
CSIS
hear that. I had to do a bunch of
threatening
interviews
his
in the afternoon, so I didn't hear a lot of the
Canada.
cross-examination.
I'll take that advice
I didn't
back,
hear
sir.
he
Thank
got...
you, Prime Minister. Thank you,
God
Commissioner.
damn! I didn't know he was
Next one.
fucking taking shots at Chong as well. Jesus.
One is Council for Andine.
It's getting
Commissioner,
Okay.
a little petty.
we
I'm
have
not
no
gonna lie.
questions for the Prime Minister. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Council for Erin O'Toole.
Thank you, Commissioner. My name is Tom Jarman, a counsel for Erin O'Toole. I'm going to start with a question to which I expect your counsel will object, but it's a process we have to go through. So Section 21 of the CSIS Act creates a statutory process whereby the agency requests the minister to approve an application to federal court for a warrant. And in the course of that warrant, it's supported by an affidavit. That affidavit sets out the affiant's knowledge of the target and the affiant's reasonable expectations of the names of the individuals whose communications will be intercepted. I'll ask you, first of all, has anyone ever advised you of the name of an individual who's been mentioned in a warrant?
We would object to the question on the grounds of national security confidentiality in line with the objections made yesterday to the same question.
I've actually got a question for you, sir. In your reading of that specific act, what is the role of the Prime Minister in the granting of warrants for CSIS?
Well, in fact, I was going to make that point, is that neither the Prime Minister nor the Prime Minister's office is named in the CSIS Act or is even part of the warrant process. And so the question we're seeking to have answered is whether or not that information was passed on to your staff yesterday and yourself today. But I take the objection.
So the question is no.
Thank you. And I'd like to also the follow-on questions: who passed on the information, the context of the discussion, and what was done with that information, if the answer is yes. Thank you.
So it's noted.
I think we maintain the objection.
Yes, I appreciate that. In the course of your direct examination this morning, Commission Counsel took you to 3 items in which permission of yourself was sought by CSIS to brief parliamentarians. And for one reason or another, that issue never rose to your attention. And I guess the first question I would ask, to use your own words, what can the public service conclude when your office refuses to decide something? Because choosing to decide is a choice.
Well, first of all, in terms of those 3 instances, the third instance never actually materialized, so it's not an issue. The first instance got interrupted by the pandemic after a few months, and I think everyone can understand that. And the second instance, as my staff testified to yesterday, was busy being worked on by my